The Local Show, sponsored by Victory in Motion, home of knee repair, not knee replacement, on News Radio 570 WSYR, on 106.9 FM, and live everywhere on the iHeartRadio app. The Local Show features in-depth conversation with business owners, employees, and influential business leaders throughout Central New York, exploring their successes, challenges, and reasons for doing business right here in our growing community. The Local Show is produced locally by Zoe Advertising. Now your hosts, Tom and Steve.
We're back again. It is The Local Show with Tom and Steve kind of ringing out from, the rain. It's just, that's the big news, right? Rain, and more rain.
Yeah.
Very moist.
And you can fish in the rain.
Sure.
I still think, and I've said it before, the fish bite better when it's raining. I think that was the tackle shop or the guy selling bait, because I've never found that to be true. I just find it colder and more miserable and
that's
less
tough.
Enjoyable. I don't know.
I always thought that the rain would churn up more food, so it was like chumming. You know, there'd be more food in the ecosystem.
Okay. So they're full.
Yeah,
they don't need any food.
So that can go both ways, right?
Yeah.
It can either chum them or they could be full.
Yeah, I might wander out this weekend a little bit. I don't know. It's time to fish.
Well, just don't slip anywhere unless you're going out on your boat. You know, that'd be different.
I can slip on the boat too, Tom.
That's true. You could slip in bed.
Yeah.
Attorney John Murphy is with us right now, owner of Safe Harbor Wills and Trust. How are you there?
I'm doing great.
John?
If you're underwater, how do you know it's raining?
That's true.
Dum-dum.
How do you know? The fish don't know, right?
Look out the window.
They get more,
Well, when the creeks are muddy, they can't see. We can figure that out, the visibility. So you have to,
So they can never see in Oneida Lake because it's always muddy.
Not always. Oneida Lake is moody. Well, you had your boat out there for a bunch of years. One day it's like clear, and the next day it looks like pea soup.
Right. Just about August. Forget about it.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting with Micron putting in new piping and stuff. What's going to happen to the lake?
I don't think that's around. That's Lake Ontario, though.
But it's coming down the river.
Right. I don't think they're going to put anything in.
Is the piping going to come down the river?
I think there's piping there now, and I think they're going to add piping.
Very interesting.
Because they have to, double the water supply?
Yeah.
So it's new, wild, and exciting in the world of estate planning, law, rules, lawyers.
Oh, yeah. Lawyers, non-lawyers, different people. So I know we were talking off the air, Steve, and I've been getting a lot of stuff from clients. So the trusts that we primarily do are designed to help people protect their home and life savings from long-term care costs. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people are worried about estate taxes and how that works. I'm going to tell 99% of your listeners, don't worry about estate taxes. You don't owe estate taxes unless you have more than $7 million as a New York State resident.
As a single or as a married couple?
As a single. So
times
per
two?
person, times two.
Okay.
I mean, there's some planning in New York to do if you're over that. But
Tom's got more than $14 million in his pocket, so he might have to be worried about it. But.
So there's a federal level that's higher, and et cetera, et cetera. But so all of our trusts, even though they're designed to keep assets away from creditors, including long-term care and Medicaid, they're designed to include your assets in your estate for estate tax purposes. People say, well, why would you want to do that? Because if you bought something low, let's say your house you bought for $100,000, okay, and when it gets sold, that $100,000 is a basis. If you sell it for $300,000, there's a capital gain. Okay.
Don't make Tom do the math.
Yep. If it's my primary residence, I don't owe tax on the first $250,000 of a capital gain.
That's where
okay. But if you give the house to your kids, okay, your basis of $100,000 carries over to them. So now they sell it for $300,000. They owe the capital gains on $200,000.
Okay.
So by keeping the estate, the house in the estate for estate tax purposes, the IRS says we're going to start over when mom and dad die. Mm-hmm. So the kids' basis in the property now becomes $300,000.
So the value of
the basis of the value. Right? Your investment.
Okay. So we didn't pay tax on that $200,000. Is that what you're saying?
Now they sell it for $300,000. We've saved tax on $200,000.
So people maybe think they're doing something good when they're really not benefiting themselves. Do financial planners know this stuff?
Well, the big thing is the IRS. So there are irrevocable trusts. People think irrevocable trust, it's all the same thing, right? We used to do this at the workshop. I need a car. Right. How does the salesperson know what kind of car you need unless you give them
correct
what I'm doing with it,
right? Right.
So Tom's taking his pontoon boat and his dog and his kids and his up to the Adirondacks every weekend.
Yep.
He doesn't need a Yugo.
Right.
But they're still cars, right?
For those old enough to know what the UNO is, right?
Yeah.
Our listeners are.
Yeah.
Well, we were talking Wolfman Jack off the air, so fell into that.
Yeah.
So anyways, the IRS came up with a rule that says if you have an irrevocable trust that is designed to keep your assets away from your estate for estate tax purposes, right? So we're talking mega millionaires, right? I want to give away some stuff so it's not included in my estate, so I'm under that $7 million, okay? IRS says we're not going to honor that anymore. So what I'm getting, I had 3 people in the last couple of weeks say, hey, my financial advisor, my tax guy, right, said that we're not going to get a step up in basis when we sell the house, when we die, okay? So I need to do X, Y, and Z. And no. Our trusts are specifically designed to work around that IRS rule. So you'll still get the step up in basis when you die, or your capital gains exemption if you sell the house while you're living. So a lot of misinformation out there because the financial advisors in particular will look at the trust, say, oh, it's irrevocable, this rule applies, without getting into the nuts and bolts of the trust to see what the rules are in the trust.
Have you trained financial planners? Have you ever done
the
that?
ones that are willing to meet with us, yeah.
Okay. Because how would they know that if they didn't sit with an attorney?
What they should do is they should call the attorney who drafted the trust,
right,
and say, "Hey, does this apply?" Right, instead of just a
not
blanket.
just guess or
Because when financial advisors and tax people are trained on irrevocable trust, they're trained on the trusts that are designed to minimize and avoid estate taxes.
Okay,
I see.
They're not trained on the Medicaid trust.
Right. Now, you mentioned before that your average, if there's such a thing, people that you help are not generally uber rich people.
No, they're mom and dad, they've worked hard all their life. Their 2 biggest assets in general are their retirement account and their home. Right. And retirement accounts in New York State are pretty well protected from long-term care, but homes are not generally. So we have a lot of people that I just know how to protect my home.
Okay, you mentioned irrevocable and then revocable. Explain the difference, other than what it seems
other than the IR.
Yeah, other than the
So, the revocable trust, the people who create a trust are known as the grantors, right? So this is where a lot of people have difficulty because you're going to have 2 or 3 different jobs with your trust,
right?
And depending on your job definition, that depends on what you can do at any particular time. Okay. So the grantor trust, or the grantors of the trust, are people who create the trust. So those are our clients. A revocable trust, it says in the rules of the trust, we may revoke this trust at any time and return all of the assets to us. Right? So the only purpose of the revocable trust, or the primary purpose, is when mom and dad die, they don't own the things that are in the trust owns it. So those things don't have to go through probate.
Okay. And why doesn't somebody want to deal with probate?
Because it's expensive. It costs on average 5% of the estate. It takes 7 months to finish. It's a public record.
So if someone had $500,000, that's $25,000
on average.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the range is 3 to 7%.
Okay.
So I'd like to use 5%.
Okay, that's fine.
The other thing is, hey, 2020, 5 years ago, what happened? The courts closed for 12 to 14 weeks.
Right.
And if you died with a will, or didn't die with a trust, your family's sitting around twiddling their thumbs.
Right. And real quick, if a will isn't current, is it current? What happens?
It's good when you die.
Okay.
So, but that's your plan, right?
Okay.
If you did a will 20 years ago, that's your plan when you die.
And if you can't find the will?
Then you don't have a will.
Okay.
And the state decides who gets
funny.
what you want. Now, to go back to your initial question,
Yeah.
An irrevocable trust says we as the grantors cannot revoke this trust anytime we want to. Okay?
Okay.
But New York State has an aha. Okay? So I call the irrevocable trust really a 2-step revocable trust. If your beneficiaries of your trust, generally the children, right, agree with you to revoke the trust, then you can revoke it.
Okay.
And if one of your kids is a wise guy and says, no, I'm not going to do that, then you can remove him as a beneficiary and you don't need his consent.
Okay. So safeharborwillsandtrusts.com. John Murphy, if you have questions, 370-9977. Thanks for joining us, John.
Thanks for having me.